Hey, what's up, guys? It's Timothy here. Aether Revolt is coming out in about a month, a little over a month. Uh, we still haven't seen very much of it. Last time I made a video, it was on the leaks for the promos for the set. Today, we are going to be looking at Ajani, and I'm going to take it on faith that this is the real Ajani, that there aren't any mistakes with it or anything like that. The card you're looking at right now on screen is a mock-up on, I believe, we're on MTG Coldfish right now. And we're just looking at the cards. So, again, there could be a problem. I don't know if this was officially spoiled or not. I didn't really do my research on it, but I've seen this a couple different times. I've seen the same iteration of it, so I'm taking it on faith that this is a real card. And again, if something ends up being wrong with it and it's not the real card, then completely disregard this video. But Ajani the Unshakable is 4 green and white for a 4 loyalty Ajani Planeswalker. The +2 ability reads, reveal the top 3 cards of your library, put each non-land permanent card revealed this way into your hand and the rest on the bottom in any order. The -2, exile target creature, its controller gains life equal to its power. So the -2 is just straight up Swords to Plowshares, the exact effect. And then the -9, which I'm going to go into a little detail on here. -9 is put 5 1/1 counters on each creature you control and 5 loyalty on each other planeswalker you control. So I'm just going to say it straight out. The -9 is not really even something you could consider. I'm going to talk about this card in limited and standard. But the -9 is just a non-factor. If you get to the point where and keep in mind, this starts at 4 loyalty. If you get to the point where you're taking this up 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and it does +2, so 6, 8, 10, then you've probably already won the game. Keep in mind, if you're plussing this, you're getting all these cards, supposedly, and you're just going to have so much card advantage that you're probably already winning. Not to mention, this is a 6-mana Planeswalker, so you've already got to be in the position where you're stable and Ajani's able to tick up without being killed, and so on and so forth. And it just keeps ticking up and up and up. And I just don't see the -9 coming up very often. Not to mention, even once you get to the -9, you've already kind of got to have a board presence in order for it to be relevant. So if you've been blocking with all your creatures just to keep Ajani alive, then you no longer have a relevant board for the -9 anyway. And the last thing I'll say is a lot of times when you play Planeswalkers like this, and you see this a lot with cards like Obnixilis and Jace, Unraveler of Secrets, and basically all of these Planeswalkers that have been developed like this, is you usually minus first, and then you start plussing after that. You wait until you have a clearing where you can play the Planeswalker and use the minus ability to kind of clear the way, and then you start plussing after that. So this will probably be at 2 Planeswalker loyalty and then take up from there. And by the time it gets to 9 or 10 or whatever, what have you, it's probably just more relevant to use the pluses minus abilities or the first 2 abilities. So -9, I'm not excited about. Even in Commander, I don't see it being that great. Even in your big Super Friends decks. Should mention that Double in Season still doesn't get this to 9, so -9 is huge, even though it is a game-winning effect, but not relevant. But how good are the plus and minus abilities, the first 2 abilities? Well, they're both very good. +2 is really, really strong. You get all of the non-lands in the top 3 of your deck. That includes other planeswalkers, creatures, instants, sorceries, artifacts, enchantments, anything that's not a land to your hand. Fantastic. Not to mention, it puts it at 6 loyalty right away, which is pretty strong if you don't have to minus right away. The -2 ability is obviously really good. You could say it's Swords to Plowshares, but keep in mind this is 6 mana. And even in Limited, if you're paying 6 mana for this effect and that's all you get out of Ajani, that's a pretty mediocre card. Definitely not something you want in your Mythic. So in Limited, you're going to need to be able to back this up, and you're going to need to make it really count. But in Limited, this is an absolute house if you can get to it. In Standard, I'm a little bit weary of it right now, and it's got mostly to do with 6 mana, and last time we saw a 6 mana Planeswalker, I believe, was Chandra Flamecaller, or whatever the one from Oath of the Gatewatch is, and that card was actually really good for a long time. It's still seeing a little bit of play, but it's been kind of knocked off the radar by the newer Chandra, and just the fact that the format's really aggressive. And keep in mind, that's kind of a couple boons against, or not boons, but banes against Ajani here, is that we are in an extremely aggressive format right now for the most part. And getting up to 6 loyalty and building up board presence while doing it in a color combination that's just not really played right now is kind of interesting. So my overall analysis here is that Ajani the Unshakable will be good if green-white ends up being good, but it's not necessarily a reason that I would start playing green-white, and I'll talk about that. Just to compare this to a couple other cards here, we have Sorin Grim Nemesis, which is still in standard, and if you look at them side by side, they're very similar. They both cost 6. They both have this kind of pseudo card advantage machine going on in their plus abilities. Their minuses are, both quite game breaking if you can get up to that point, even though I imagine they won't often do that. I've very rarely seen Sorin get up to -9. And then their minus abilities kind of pick off creatures, so they're very similar in that regards too. And it's debatable which of these is the better ability. Obviously, minus the exile clause here is pretty good, but it gains your opponent life, whereas Grim and Nemesis oftentimes have to trade itself for certain creatures, or leaves itself in a state where it's not able to recuperate. Also doesn't tick up as fast. But Sorin Grim Nemesis is not really a reason to play black-white. It's just really good when black-white is really good, right? I mean, nobody's saying, all right, Grim Nemesis is the backbone of my deck. If I draw that, that's what I need to win the game. No, it's just that if you have kind of this late-game deck that happens to be playing black and white, then you want Sorin Grim Nemesis in your deck. And keep in mind, like, the black-white decks that are being played at the filming of this video are these aggressive human-based decks and these weird kind of like artifact-based, low-to-the-ground, super quick decks. So you don't really want Sorin in those decks anyway, and I can see that for Ajani as well. If you're trying to play, your Smuggler's Copter deck, and you're playing your one-drop humans and your green creatures to just kind of crew it, and you're going for this really aggro green-white deck, do you really want this 6-mana guy who doesn't really come down and do what your deck's trying to do in your deck? And the answer is probably no. Same goes for Tamiyo. If you look at these side by side, they're very similar, and Tamiyo does kind of reach into a third color here, but the +1 abilities give you this kind of machine where you're drawing cards, you're getting extra cards in your hand. It's, again, debatable which of these is better. Obviously, if these were both, equal cards as far as like casting cost goes and everything like that, then I think Ajani's ability would be better because you don't have to involve combat on anybody's creatures in order to draw those cards, whereas Ajani just takes up and gives you a bunch of cards. But, Tamiyo in the right kind of deck, if you're playing a lot of flyers, or you're playing Sylvan Advocate, so on and so forth, and you're attacking a lot, is, pretty close to Ajani. It doesn't draw you as many cards, but you can reliably think that out of every 3 cards, you're probably going to hit at least 1 land, depending on how your deck's built. So I like to think of this +2 as a draw 2, or draw 2 relevant cards, which is pretty nice. The -2 on Tamiyo is obviously a little bit weaker than Ajani's, I think. It's not a permanent way to deal with things. It's not really the ability you want to come down and use right away unless you have to. You want to plus Tamiyo right away, whereas a lot of times I think you'll be fine playing Ajani and minusing right away. And then the -7 on Tamiyo is, in my opinion, leaps and bounds better than the -9 here. But, I could be wrong. But they kind of they definitely overlap in color, and, mana's not bad in this format right now, especially with things like Aether Hub and the Fast Lands. So playing a Bant is not that much better than playing Ajani, or, that much worse as far as, like, getting your mana and everything like that. Not to mention, Tamiyo's pretty well supported by, like, these spirit decks, these decks that play Spell Queller, and these aggressive blue-white decks. I haven't seen a lot of Tamiyo, but it's been quite good, and it's seen a lot of play in the sideboard of things like Spirit decks, and obviously has dropped off just a little bit since Bant Company left the format, but Bant is still pretty strong in the format, and I think Tamiyo kind of achieves what you're doing with Ajani. And the last Planeswalker I wanted to compare it to here, and this isn't really a direct comparison like the last two, is Nissa, Voice of Zendikar. Remember when this card just dominated Standard? Remember when this card was fantastic and now it's not being played at all? Well, if you're playing Ajani, I think you want Nissa in your deck too. And I don't know, maybe green-white like has a shell here, like this really go-wide shell. But I just don't see Ajani being like the big part of that deck. I don't think Ajani's the card that you're trying to get up to and win the game. Now, if you're playing a control deck, if green-white control ends up being a thing and you're playing like Fumigates, which, yeah, seems counterintuitive with the minus ability here, but if you're able to keep the board clear and you can just tick up and up and up and you have some sort of other win condition, then I could see Ajani being your big thing. This is no Elspeth. This is definitely not like wipe the board of all the big creatures and then win from that point. You have to... Ajani's only as good as the rest of the cards in your deck, right? Elspeth will win the game on her own. Her emblem usually did that. But I just don't see the -9 coming up very often, even though there's a good correlation between the plussing and minusing of Nissa and the minusing here of Ajani. So I have no idea what kind of standard decks will come about because of this. This is a type of Planeswalker where I think it'll get better after rotation, after a more recent rotation when decks have kind of slowed down a little bit. Because right now, everything's just super aggressive or very controlling, and it's hard for like a 6-mana Planeswalker to break in here. Part of the reason that Chandra Flamecaller is kind of leaving the format, and keep in mind the reason Flamecaller is still kind of seeing play is because it functions as a board wipe. Ajani is, sometimes a 6-mana deal with a creature or deal with 2 creatures over the course of 2 turns, but is that what you want out of your 6-mana card? I have no idea. Limited purposes, I will play this every time. I know I can't really tell what the format is, but I'm hoping Aether Revolt slows down the format a little bit and you can get away with a 6-mana Planeswalker in your deck. But that remains to be seen as far as how Aether Revolt format will work. So those are my opinions about Johnny. I'd love to hear your opinions. I'd love to hear if you think it's kind of on par with these other Planeswalkers that I mentioned here, or if these Planeswalkers maybe have a place together in the deck. Another note here is if you're playing white, you're just already playing Gideon. Isn't Gideon going to win you the game before Johnny wins you the game? I have no idea. But I'm not a standard expert. These are just my thoughts. But the card is still really cool. It's very Garuki in its +2 ability, just a card advantage for green type ability. And the +2, I think, is where its major power lies. It just gives you so much card advantage over the course of a game. So this is a very powerful Planeswalker. I just don't know if it has a place in the current standard right now. We'll have to see what kind of support goes, and if green-white ends up being a thing, then I believe Ajani will definitely be a thing. But the card's cool. I'd love to hear your opinion about it. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe below, especially comment if you have any thoughts about this, and let me know what you think of the card. My name's Timothy. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all next time.